Well, hello everyone. Hi, friends. How's everybody doing? Welcome. I'm Sьюзен Bauэрmан, registered dietitian. I am here in my kitchen in California, and I hope everybody's doing well. We're having an interesting weather day here today. It's been raining. We got about 4 inches of rain at my house, and now the sun is coming out, so life is good. And I hope everything is good for you as well. Thank you, as always, for taking some time out of your day to spend this time with me. And, we are going to have a recipe as we always do. But before we get to that, always a couple of reminders. Number one, I often say this is your show and this is your time with me. So you've got a half an hour. We've got time to look at the video, but we also have time to take questions at the end. So please, please, please look in that comment section if you have any questions either about the recipe that we're doing today or just any questions about nutrition, anything about cooking, any health related questions that you might have. Go ahead and put those in the comment section. We'll try to get to those after we watch the video. Always happy to do that. And then the other thing, the more important thing is please let me know where you are watching from. That's always so fun. I love to give some shout outs. Always amazed how many people are watching from all different places, all corners of the world. So let me know so I can say hi to all of you. So, all right, before we get to the recipe, it is the end of the year and we've had a great year. I was looking back. We did almost 20 live recipes this year. We're going to continue those again next year. And I decided, since it's the end of the year, people are celebrating. I don't normally do a lot of desserts, but I thought for this show, since it is kind of special at the end of the year, that we would do something a little special. So today we are making a chocolate mousse cheesecake with a cherry almond crust. And we are incorporating some of our wonderful Herbalife Nutrition products, which you will see in the video. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you watch so you can find out what it is. But it's a great dessert. It's going to be a good one that you can use now and be thinking about if you're going into events and you want to take something special to somebody's house, or if you want to adapt it maybe next year. This is one of those recipes that you can do a lot with it. You can change the flavors quite a bit. So let's go ahead. Let's watch the video for our chocolate mousse cheesecake. Be sure to come back. Don't leave, because after the video, I always like to come back, give you the numbers, give you all the wonderful nutrition content of our chocolate mousse cheesecake. All right, so let's watch the video and I will be back afterwards to give you all the nutrition info. Okay, let's make dessert. Chocolate mousse cheesecake with cherry almond crust. I'm excited already because it sounds so good. All right, this is a really, really simple to put together dessert. It's going to remind you a lot of cheesecake, but we've made some modifications to make it a little bit healthier, which is always a good thing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a crust. And if you've ever made cheesecake, you know that your usual cheesecake crust is it's graham crackers, it's butter, and it's sugar. So it's basically white flour, sugar, and fat. And which is, it's fine once in a while for a treat, but as long as we're doing this, why don't we try to make this a little bit healthier? So we're going to make our cheesecake in a 9-inch pan with a removable bottom, like that. Sometimes there's ones called springform, which have like a clamp on the side, which will work really well too. If you don't have something like this, and if your pan doesn't have a removable bottom, it'll probably work. It'll be a little bit harder to serve. So the other thing you could do, which would be great, is just make this in a pie pan. It's going to work perfectly because we're just going to put the crust on the bottom. So pie pan, good sized pie pan will work really well. I am going to spray this with pan spray because we don't want the filling to stick. We're not going to bake this cheesecake. This one's going to go in the refrigerator. And so I just want to be sure that when we do this, that it's not going to stick when we go to take it out. All right, so we're going to just set that aside. And to make the crust, as I said, I wanted to do something more than just, graham crackers and butter and sugar. But I wanted this to be a little indulgent. It's end of the year, we're kind of celebrating, and so it's fine. And because I knew the filling was going to be chocolate, and I'm actually working with a new flavor of Formula 1 that we just launched not too long ago here in the US. It's our dark chocolate almond flavor, which is really, really good. And so I just wanted to continue that whole almond flavor. And so what I'm using for the crust is I'm using 3/4 of a cup of almond meal. Now, almond meal is a little bit different from almond flour for 2 reasons. One is it's not ground as finely as flour. And the other thing is that it usually still has the skins on it, which has actually a lot of nutrition in it. And so it's got a little bit more texture to it. It's got a little bit more nutrients to it, a little more fiber. So that's what I'm using. If you use almond flour, I think it'll probably work, but try to seek out the almond meal because it's a very versatile ingredient. I use it sometimes to coat chicken breasts or even a little bit of fish if I'm going to grill it. It's really, really good. All right, 3/4 of a cup of almond meal. Then I'm going to use 3/4 of a cup of dried cherries because cherry and chocolate and almond is just such a winning combination. Now, the nice thing about this recipe though is it's really versatile. So if you wanted to use a different dried fruit, by all means go ahead. You could also use a different nut. You could use walnuts, you could use cashews, you could use probably any kind of nut that you wanted to. You could either grind it up into a meal if you want to do that, or you can just use the whole ones because we're going to put it in the food processor anyway. All right, so 3/4 of a cup of dried cherries, and then we need something to kind of hold this together. And so to continue the whole almond flavor thing that we've got going, I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of almond butter. And you know, again, in terms of versatility, I think there's lots you could do here. Peanut butter, of course, would work. I think tahini, which is sesame butter, would be delicious in this, depending on what fruits you decided to use. I think that would be really good, for instance, like with dried apricots. There's a lot of things you could do with that. All right, that's it. That's all that goes in the crust. Now, I'm doing this in the food processor. You could do this in the blender. If you do, you're probably going to have to start and stop a little bit and scrape down the sides, but it should work. But I wanted to just do this because it's quick, and what you're going to see is we're just going to blend it very quickly, and the whole thing's going to just hold together sort of magically. So here we go. Okay. And basically what we're going for is we don't want to grind it up until it just completely, you know, disintegrates. We want to keep a little bit of texture there. But it's just enough to hold together. I mean, that's really, you know, we've still got some pieces of dried fruit, but that little bit of almond butter that I put in there is just enough to kind of keep this together. Get this out of the way here. Just to keep this together. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to put this into that pan that we just sprayed with pan spray. And all you're going to do now is take this and you're just going to kind of press it down into the bottom of the pan with the back of a fork. And your layer isn't going to be very thick, but don't want to miss any of that goodness that we've put in there. Just take your back of your fork like that, spread this around, and then just take your fork and sort of push the ingredients towards the edges of the pan. We want to get all the way to the edge, and we want to be sure that the bottom's covered pretty well. But, you know, just kind of tamp it down with your fork. You just want this to hold together. You don't have to get super fancy with this, but it makes a really good base for what we're going to put inside, because we've got so much flavor in there. And while I'm doing this, let's just talk about also just nutritionally what we've got going on. You know, almonds, we talk at Herbalife a lot about, you know, balanced meals and healthy fats and so forth. And tree nuts, so those are things like almonds and walnuts and pecans, are particularly good sources of those healthy fats. And so, you know, whenever we can incorporate them, if we're going to use some fat in a recipe, using something like an almond or a walnut is always a good idea. And then the cherries, because they are just a dried fruit, we've got a lot of vitamin C, for example, from those cherries. And cherries actually have a little bit of iron in them too, which is sort of good too. All right, so that's it. That's all you have to do. Just pat that down. I've made that nice and smooth. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator. You don't really have to if you're going to go ahead and make your filling right away. But if you decide for some reason you need to stop in the middle. Put this in the refrigerator. That way it'll just keep it from getting too soft. So I'm going to pop that in the refrigerator without taking my my microphone with me. All right, so that's that. Sorry guys, I gotta untangle myself here so I can move. Now, in order to make the filling, what we're gonna do is what's gonna hold this filling together, we're gonna use some gelatin. Now, if you've made cheesecake before, one of the reasons I wanted to modify this is because your typical cheesecake, it's very heavy and it's very high calorie because we've got, you know, it's got cream cheese, it's got sour cream, it's got eggs, it's baked, it's, you know, it's big and it's thick, but it's very, very, very high in calories. And so what we're using to make this sort of lighter version, in addition to using our dark chocolate almond Formula 1, is we are going to use a little cream cheese. I'm going to use some whipped cream cheese and some yogurt and a little bit of milk, but we need something to help it kind of set up. And so I'm using just plain gelatin. Now, if you don't want to use gelatin, if you're looking for a vegetarian alternative, you can buy something in the store called agar or agar. This one is called agar. And this is a gelatin-like product. It's derived from seaweed. And I'm going to just use the regular gelatin today. The reason is that this one, you're going to see in a minute, we're going to dissolve this one in boiling water. Agar, if you decide to use it, it sets up almost immediately. And so it's something that you might want to experiment with a little bit. You're probably going to want to add this at the very last minute. But just wanted to mention that in case you wanted to look for an alternative. All right, so what we do for the gelatin is we're going to take a half a cup of boiling water and pour that into a bowl. And then we just sprinkle the gelatin on top and stir it and set it aside. Now, another caution is don't do this unless you're ready to go ahead and make the rest of the filling, because as this cools, it's going to set up. So we just are going to put this aside for a minute. So just sprinkle this on top, and you're going to stir this up with a fork until it's well dissolved. And each one of these packets that I'm using is about a tablespoon of gelatin. I don't know if you can buy it in bulk. It's almost always sold like this in these packets. All right, so we're going to stir that up and set that aside. And again, what that's going to do, this is unflavored gelatin. What this is going to do is just going to help our chocolate mousse cheesecake set up. Okay, so that's all we need to do with that. We're going to set that aside. And now I'm going to pull out my mixer. I don't think I've ever done a recipe where I had to use my big fancy mixer, so I was very excited about this. It's also really heavy. All right, and now you don't have to use your big fancy mixer, but what we want to do is we want to whip this filling up. We want to get it really light and really fluffy. So if you have a hand mixer, that's great. If you've got lots of good arm strength or you're looking for a good workout, you can do this just with a regular whisk. But I want you to notice I'm using the whisk attachment, not the regular beater, because I want to get a lot of air into this. All right, so to get our flavor and to get tons of nutrition, I'm starting with 8 scoops of our Formula 1 dark chocolate almond. Now, again, the versatility of this recipe is you can use any flavor you want to. I think in the summertime using a fruit flavor would be really wonderful, but I was going for chocolate. So I've got 8 scoops of that going into the mixer. And then I'm going to put in 1.25 cups of non-fat Greek style yogurt. This is vanilla flavor yogurt. And yogurt makes such a great stand-in for sour cream in recipes like this because, you know, it's non-fat, whereas sour cream is a lot of fat. But it's got the same texture and it's got the same tang, which is really nice. And then I'm using also 1.25 cups of whipped cream cheese. So you can buy this, you know, here in the US, it's really easy to find this. I figured as long as I'm whipping, I might as well get some cream cheese that's already whipped. It'll save me a little bit of time. And on a per tablespoon basis, it's actually got less fat than regular cream cheese. So that's perfect. And then we do need a little bit of extra liquid. So I'm putting in 1/2 cup of low-fat milk. All right, and that is it until we add the gelatin. So I'm going to turn this on. When I did this the first time, I was getting very aggressive. I turned it on high and all the Formula One powder went flying. So I'm going to start slowly. And again, what we're going for, we want to whip a lot of air into this. We want this to be kind of light. You know, I know cheesecake usually is pretty dense, but I wanted to just get a little bit lighter texture to this. All right, it's mixed, so we can crank this up to high. All right, what I want you to see is that this is already kind of getting to be this nice, almost like a marshmallowy texture. It's getting really, really light and really fluffy. And so what I'm going to do now is, remember that gelatin we did, that 2 packets or 2 tablespoons of gelatin and that half a cup of boiling water, that's going to go in now. And this, as I said, is that once this goes in the refrigerator, you can see it's already starting to get a little gooey, starting to set up a little bit. This is going to help our cheesecake to set up. All right, so that goes in, and I'm just going to whip this a little bit more. All right, so this is now beautiful. I mean, the texture is kind of amazing here. We've got this nice whipped texture. It's going to be thick, but it's not going to be heavy at all. So I'm going to take this off here, which you can see, it's got this wonderful, like I said, kind of almost like a marshmallowy type of texture, which is pretty amazing. All right, so I pulled this out of the refrigerator, and this is now going to go on top of the crust that we made. This is amazing. Look at this. I mean, the texture is just fantastic. It's fluffy, it's smooth. It's not a heavy chocolate because we've got, you know, the cream cheese in there and we've got the yogurt, both of which, by the way, are, you know, adding lots of protein. We have plenty of protein that we added as well because we had those 8 scoops of Formula One that we used, which that adds 36 grams of protein to our cheesecake right there. And believe me, most people don't look to cheesecake as a protein source. So we've got that, and then we've got this wonderful texture that we got between the yogurt and the cream cheese. And what you want to do is just kind of spread this around. This is just so beautiful and so fluffy. I'm very excited about this. And, you know, flavor-wise, I think that, as I said, there's so many things you could do with this. I think in the summertime you might want to go with more of a fruity flavor, which would be fun. I think we had a flavor that we launched not too long ago, a mango pineapple, that I think would be really delicious, and you could probably even fold in a little bit of mango fruit, which would be pretty great. All right, so, and then just smooth the top like that. You can see already it's pretty thick, but we want this to really set up so that we can slice it, and so it's going to go in the refrigerator and it's going to stay at least 3 hours, I would say. Give it that much time to set up, and then it's ready to serve. So this is a nice thing because you can make it in the morning if you're having company or guests coming over, and later in the day. It's just a nice thing to be able to make, and no baking required, which is pretty great. All right, so we're going to take some plastic wrap and put that on top and stick that in the refrigerator. And then I want to pull out the one that I made earlier so you can see what we've got. So that's going in. Be careful, by the way, with these removable bottoms. Grab this by the rim, so don't push it up like that. All right, so let's pull out the one that I made earlier. And something kind of fun to decorate it with as well. Okay, so here it is. Here is our delicious chocolate mousse cheesecake. And I'm going to take this out of the pan. And you don't really have to unmold it. You should be able to just pop this right out carefully. There we go. You kind of need 3 hands to do this properly. And I'm going to set this on my plate here. And what I did for fun to decorate, I figured as long as we were doing this, I might as well go all the way. If you've never made chocolate leaves, it's really fun. You just get some leaves out of your yard. These are just some oak leaves that I found outside. You want to use leaves that are not toxic. You wash them, you pat them dry with paper towels, and then you just melt some chocolate. I just melted some chocolate chips that I had. This is just milk chocolate chips. And you paint the underside of the leaf, not the top, the underside, all the way to the edges, and then just stick them in the freezer for like 10 minutes. And then the chocolate will harden, but the leaf won't be frozen yet, so you'll be able to just peel it right off. And then once you do that, you can just stick them in the refrigerator. They're really fun. They're fun to make, and they look really pretty on top of your dessert. So I figured as long as we were making dessert, why not do that and get kind of fancy with it? So that's really pretty. And we're going to get 12 pretty good sized servings out of this. This is a pretty big cheesecake. And yet when I tell you about all the nutrition that's in it, you're going to be kind of amazed, especially compared to a typical cheesecake. So there we go. Let's go ahead and cut this, because I do want you to see the texture of this cheesecake. Get there in between my leaves there. I want you to be able to see the texture of the cheesecake, as well as what the, not just the filling, but I want you to see how this looks with the crust. I hate to ruin my leaf, so I'm going to cut a really giant piece here, just so that you can see how this looks. I love this because, as I said, cheesecake is a pretty popular dessert, but it's one of those things that it's just so heavy that, you almost have to plan your whole day around it, because it's just got so many calories in it. So you can see that this sliced up really nicely, right? It's just perfect. We've got that nice crust that you can see on the bottom. And of course, our beautiful chocolate leaf. I probably could have made smaller ones. And then when we cut into it, what you'll see is it just cuts perfectly. I'm going to taste it. And what I love about this is it's got this nice chocolate mousse texture. Even though we use gelatin, it's not the texture of Jell-O. So I don't want you to think that this is going to be that gelatinous. It's not. We didn't really use that much. To use 2 tablespoons of this and this entire cheesecake, it was really just enough to hold it together. So that's why I chose to do this. And I was able to keep that kind of chocolate mousse cheesecakey texture that I was after. So lots of fun, great recipe. Quick to do, very easy to put together, and something that I hope you'll try at home. And if you do, let me know. And if you change the flavors, you use a different flavor of Formula 1, you change something around the crust, let us know. Share your recipes. It's always fun to do that. Don't go away, because we packed a ton of nutrition in here, and I'm going to give you all the numbers when we get back, so don't go away. Okay. I hope you enjoyed watching that, and I hope it made your mouth water and you're ready to try and experiment with really any flavor of Formula 1 is great for that cheesecake. Just our regular Dutch chocolate, I think, would be perfect for that one. As I said, you could go fruit-wise, any way you want to go. The nutrition information, it's pretty much the same for no matter what flavor you use. So here's the thing. We made 12 servings. So each serving of our chocolate mousse cheesecake, 180 calories, and we've got 8 grams of protein packed in there and only about 8 grams of fat, which is pretty good when you consider that a typical cheesecake, depending on where you get it, can range anywhere from like 400 to as high as 900 calories per slice. And the protein is about the same, but it's got 4 to 6 times the amount of fat, because it's got all of that cream cheese that's in there and the sour cream and so forth. So we've really made something yummy and pretty nutritious as well. All right, before we get to the questions, very quickly, I have some shout outs. I can't get over, I'm always so touched by all of you watching from so far away. Hi to Joni, who's watching from Ohio. Hi to Lola, all the way in Scotland. Hi, Lola. Thank you for watching. Hi to Pernville, who's watching from South Africa. Awilda is watching from Puerto Rico. And I've got Tracy in the UK. It's got to be very late over there. And let's see, Jose. Hi, Jose. He's watching from Miami. Lorena from Chicago. Janice is watching us from Boston. Sherry Lynn, is it Sherry Lynn, I think, is Trinidad and Tobago. This is unbelievable. And Seiko is watching from Lebanon. So gosh, thank you all for watching. This is just kind of amazing that you're all watching from so many different places around the globe. I really appreciate you being here. So let's get to the questions. One, Laura said about the gelatin alternative. She wanted to know the name again. So it's not a brand name, Lorna. It's just something called Agar. It's Agar. And I found mine in my local health food store, and you can probably get it online. It comes in flakes. The flakes are a little bit bigger than the gelatin, and you may have to experiment a little bit because it's usually a 1-to-1 replacement for the gelatin. So in other words, a tablespoon for a tablespoon. But as I said, the main thing with that one is as soon as you mix it with water, it starts to set. So rather than mixing that, setting it aside and making the filling, what I would do, Lorna, is make the filling, whip everything up, then just mix up the agar with the water and pour it right in, and then go ahead and put it in the refrigerator. Okay, Tatiana wants to know, can I use vegan yogurt? Yeah, absolutely. I think vegan yogurt would be great because remember, what's really giving its structure is the gelatin that I use. And then in your case, Tatiana, if you're going to do more of a vegetarian version, then you could use the agar. And I think that would work perfectly. And then Erica wants to know, do you think we could make it the day before? Yes, Erica, you absolutely can make it the day before, because I will tell you that when I was trying to create this recipe, I made it many, many times. And so I did have a lot of opportunities to, keep it in the refrigerator overnight. And it actually keeps really well. So I would say it probably would keep even up to 2 days if you wanted to, because that gelatin is really holding it together. So lots of versatility there. The fact that, to be able to make a really wonderful holiday dessert and yet have something that you can make, let's say the day before, because sometimes the day of, you're pretty busy. So it's nice to be able to have something like that to do. So, and then Ariel wants to know, can you do it without a crust? Yeah, you totally could do that without a crust. So if you didn't want to do, the nuts and the dried fruit on the bottom, you could totally do that. What I would suggest you do there, just make sure that you either, oil your pan or use the pan spray just so that you can, so it'll release really well. But I mean, that should work perfectly. And then Kira wants to know, how long does it last in the fridge? So Kira, all I can tell you is that when I made it, I kept it for about 2 days for sure before we ate the whole thing. And it was fine. I mean, sometimes you're worried that things like that might get kind of watery, but the texture was just fine. So I think just to be on the safe side, I'd say probably 2 days should do it. All right. So our show has come to a close. Our year together has come to a close, but no fear, because I will be back in January. We'll probably in the early part of the year, probably not be doing desserts right at the beginning. I know a lot of you at the beginning of the year are sort of thinking about New Year's resolutions and getting back into shape and so forth. So, we'll mix it up for sure. If you have any suggestions, any ideas, any recipes you'd like me to create for you, put it in the comments for sure. We will get to those. Thank you again to all of you for always being here. Love having you here. Love knowing where you're watching from. And I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe holiday season and a happy new year. And I will see you in 2022.